And we're here in this next segment of a Phil Haney Celebration of Life event with Mr. James Simpson. And we're honored to have James Simpson with us to help eulogize the memory of a life and the work of Mr. Phil Haney, who, of course, is the author of See Something, Say Nothing, Chronicles of a Willful Distribution of Blinders throughout the past, recent past. But we're not going to focus on all of that today. We really want to remember the man and the legacy and how much he meant to people. And let me remove my ego from this equation. And Mr. Simpson, would you just feel free to tell us how much this individual, this person, this human being, Phil Haney, meant to you, please?
Okay. Thanks, Wes. And thanks for having me on and thanks for putting this on. I mean, that was really that's thoughtful of you. And in light of the fact that it's unlikely that we're going to have any kind of public service with his family and all that, uh, this is a good way to remember him in lieu of that. Yeah, I'm sad that we can't go to his service. I think sorry to hear that his family just wanted to keep it private, and they didn't want any of us coming or anything like that. Um, but that's their right. You got to respect it. When that day that we found out that he died, at first somebody texted me and they thought it was a joke, and and I just sort of dismissed it. I said, "Oh, it's a joke." And then somebody called me later, and I forget who, and it said, "Did you hear about Phil?" And I'm like, "Well, I heard something, but I thought it was a joke." I said, "No, it's not a joke." And really, I still didn't believe it. I needed to talk with some people, and I wound up talking with John Guandolo and a couple of other folks, and it turned out, yes, that in fact it was true. And I got to tell you, I was in shock. I was just in shock. Um, I've known Phil, or I knew Phil from pretty much when he came on the scene, because both he and I were doing work for the Center for Security Policy. And I met him at meetings at the Center for Security Policy offices, and we talked, at meetings and got to know each other a little bit. I got to know something about him. He got to know something about me. And, we, he was very gregarious and we would talk on the phone from time to time. And, we got comfortable with each other to the point where in 2017 he said, "Hey, why don't we tour the Midwest together, go out in my RV?" And this was in October 2017. And I said, "Heck yeah, let's do it." And so we launched a 17-day tour where we went through Ohio, Kentucky, Illinois, Minnesota, um, and both the North and South Dakota, and and then back. And we spoke numerous times in all of those states, many times in Minnesota. We went up to Duluth, saw our friends up there. It was a really nice time. It was the first time I'd ever been to Duluth. And all this time traveling in his famous RV. And,
Was
it,
the dog with you at that time on those
the
trips?
dog was with us. The
Uh,
dog was with us the entire time. Yep. And the dog was very well behaved. The dog came out of the RV every few hours to stop and do its business. But yeah, no, it was very well behaved. And uh, but I got to know Phil very well on that trip, and he has an amazing life story. You know, as Trevor mentioned earlier, he was a very devout Christian. Uh, I'm a Christian as well, but compared to Phil, and probably compared to most people, actually, I'm a baby Christian, you
Oh,
know,
yes.
and but he had an advanced degree. I mean, most people don't know this, but when he was young, I mean, he became a Christian very young. When he was young, he was a street preacher for 3 years. He was a street preacher. And so he could cite the Bible chapter and verse, and really very, very spiritual, very centered guy. And it always cracked me up. I was having a little bit of problem when we were traveling across country, and my back had gone out, and
Hmm.
and so I, spent a lot of time sitting on the driver's side. I mean, in the passenger side, just looking out the window. He was on the phone the entire time. I mean, he was calling or getting calls from anybody and everybody. And you've gotten the call. Hey, amigo, how you doing? What's going on?
Amigo.
You know, and uh, and he had a great laugh. A very very hearty, from the heart laugh, and and sometimes irreverent, but always with a good spirit. And so that's how I got to know Phil. And he was very um, always shared, and this is important to somebody who does a lot of presentations like myself. We would be going through, or I would watch his presentation, or I'd be looking at his presentation before he did. I said, "Where'd you get that? Where'd you get that bit of information?" He said, "Here, there, whatever." He said, "Feel free to use it if you want." And so I would gladly, steal his PowerPoint pages and put them in mine, include them in mine. He never had pride of ownership. And it was something, these days I share my PowerPoint with anybody that wants it. Back then, before him, I was pretty stingy with him. I
Yeah.
didn't want to share them with anybody. I don't want anybody else stealing my thunder. But he taught me better than that. And so today, somebody wants my PowerPoint, I'll share it with them. And so, and it's because of Phil. It's because of Phil. He showed that generous, unselfish spirit, and it made me think, yeah, well, maybe I should be that way too. And so he was uh, just a dynamite guy, and we were so shocked. I was so shocked when I learned that he had died, been killed. I don't know what really happened. I don't know that we'll ever know. Yeah, I spoke with many people after he died, and I wrote an article about that in American Thinker, and I called it an assassination. Um,
In
his,
American Thinker, what's the title of that article that you wrote for American Thinker? Again, I remember reading that at the
yep,
time online. It was shared widely.
yep.
What's the title?
It was called Phil Haney, My Friend and Colleague Assassinated. And, that's what he was to me. He was a very good friend. He was a colleague. And, I also met um, his wife, and I had the good fortune at one time, we all met at the Eisenhower Executive Office building for a meeting. And that was, we were very fortunate to get in. That's part of the White House complex. And when I was at the Office of Management and Budget, my boss had his office in that building, and it's one of the most beautiful. Well, I think it's the most beautiful building in Washington D.C. And Marcella really wanted to see it, and she had come with us, and I was able to give her a tour of that whole building. And I was so grateful that I had the opportunity to do that. She loved it. We went to the Indian Treaty Room, which is the most it's just stunning. I can't describe it to you. It's just ornate and beautiful. It was never used for Indian treaties, but that's that's
Yeah.
beside the point. Um,
Yeah.
but the building was built from 1871 to 1888, and I actually got to know it very well because I just love to travel around it and I talk to folks about it. But anyway, that was one memory that I do cherish about her because she just got such a thrill at being able to walk down the halls and see the National Security Council, see the Council of Economic Advisors, and especially the Indian Treaty Room. Oh, and the White House Library is gorgeous. And then there is a law library on the very top floor. It's it's more subdued, but it's even prettier in many ways. And the uh, book racks are made with brass, solid brass,
Oh,
and it's stunning. I mean, it is really stunning. They really knew how to do stuff back then. Anyway, so that was something that of course I met her at other times, but that time was very special because, I was able to use my experience to give her a little treat, something that she had wanted to see. Um,
he was
and
so devoted to her too.
oh,
It's astonishing how devoted he was that they'd been together for those 4 decades. You think of
yeah,
what it means to a lifetime
yeah,
of commitment to
yeah,
a you tremendous.
yeah, no, it really was. And and he would always be checking in with her when we were on the road. And Phil is so dedicated. And, in the 2018 election year, as you know, he went between Michigan and Minnesota like nonstop and just devoted both times. And, I don't think anybody could have done any more than Phil did to try to raise the alarm, to try to get people off their couches to go out and vote. And unfortunately, in Minnesota anyway, that didn't happen. And I think Minnesota and Michigan both are cursed with a GOP that useless. I use a better term when I'm speaking privately, but it's totally useless. And really, it's a crying shame because I don't think Minnesota or Michigan need to be in the condition they're in. It's really up to you guys to get out there, get the vote out, and defeat these people. It's just uncanny, and it's awful how they've taken over that state. And and I know Phil, he was so upset about that year after that election, and and then Marcella died, and he was heartbroken, and he went back to basically recuperate, really, when he decided to move back to California and sell everything in on the East Coast in Georgia and leave the place that he was living in Virginia. He really did it to recuperate, and so
Too many memories were tied up in those days. Too many
well,
memories.
and he
But the
just
heart.
needed, yeah, and he just needed to decompress and basically recover from that. And so he was not totally off the grid, but he did a lot less work during that year. And it was, therapeutic for him. He needed to do that. And then, towards the end of last year, we started hearing more from him. He was working on the new book, and of course he met Denise. He had been on the radio with her a number of times, and things were really looking up for Phil. And and then that happened, and it was a brutal thing. Now, Trevor said this, and I'll add it. I mean, I'll say it again. He's in a better place. There's no doubt about that, and he's with Marcella again, which I he must be overjoyed about. Um, uh, but we're left here to deal with it. You know, um, it's like I have said about people who die, well, for any reason, whether you die in battle or you die in disease or natural causes or but worst is the untimely death, and because the person loses their life, but
He's
we
the sort of
lose the rest.
warrior.
We lose them for the rest of our lives, and
It's our
that's
loss.
and it is our burden to take, and it's difficult. It's more difficult in many ways.
He's the
Although,
person who would have been willing to fall on his sword as long as he's falling forward
yeah,
on his sword.
right, right, right.
And the ancient honor of doing your best by your friends
Yeah,
meant something to him. It's a lost code of honor.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think a lot of us in the movement have that honor too. But he was a real inspiration. There's no doubt about it. He was a real inspiration. And
Remember how he used to say, we need to be wise as serpents, but harmless as doves? He would
yeah,
often insert that at some point during his presentation so that there would be no doubt about it
yeah,
that he was deadly serious about what he was saying, but he
right,
wasn't issuing any kind of a call to action. No violence in the man at all.
right.
Man of peace.
Yeah, that's true.
Complete man of peace.
He was, and his whole demeanor was that way. I mean, he was always soft spoken, always very humble. Um, but he was very smart and very capable. Very few people could have survived what he did, what the Obama administration attempted to do to him. And we talked at length about that actually on the trip. And, because if he said one word wrong, he had said one thing wrong, misspoken on anything, they would have caught him. But he kept impeccable records, and he also outsmarted them. I mean, it was pretty funny because they took all the records, but he kept a copy of all the records. So they didn't really take all the records. That's one thing. And then the other thing was that he said that, you know, all these incriminating emails that they passed among themselves, he got CC'd on.
That's hilarious. They forgot to remove him as
They forgot to take him off the distribution list. So, 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 so he had all these absolutely oh, this is what we're going to do today. Oh, that's what we're going to do. I mean, he had all that stuff, an email that he could show to
right.
the sympathetic members of Congress that he did. And it's really funny because, I mean, he had them tied in knots. There wasn't a thing they could do. And, and but he was careful about that too. He didn't show his cards on any of that. He just kept it and tried not to laugh, you know. and, and so, and that was quite something. But it was a real ordeal, and it went on for, I don't know, years. It went on for years, and 9 separate investigations. And most those of us, and that's the power of faith, because most of us would have cracked. I would have cracked. I think. I don't know, but I think so. It definitely be something very, very hard to withstand,
Right.
and you can only imagine the pressure and the fear the fear of the unknown, the fear of what they're going to try to do next, how you're going to manage it financially, all these various issues, which if you are not seriously grounded in faith, those fears will kill you. And he was not afraid. He was able to stand up to them and stand strong and never waver, never lose faith that he would get through that. And he did. And it was quite an amazing story. And that book is quite an amazing book. And the one that he's coming out with, the one he's coming out with called National Security Meltdown, I believe they're still going to publish that. I'm not certain, but I believe they are. It was pretty much done. It was a completed, I've seen the draft, but and that's going to expose even more of the stuff that happened. And so that's something for people who are listening, everybody to keep in mind for the, I hope, not too distant future, because Phil will be talking and exposing things from the grave. And I think that's all I want to say. I was telling you before we started, Phil's a good guitar player, and he used to play the guitar a lot. And when we were parked somewhere and staying overnight, he'd always pick up his guitar and play for a little while. And I had learned how to play guitar back in the early aughts. And but when President Obama was elected, I became so discouraged that I just dumped it flat. I felt like I had no right to spend any hours in a frivolous activity like playing guitar when the whole country was burning down. And I just lost my heart completely. Well, I've picked it up more recently. I think you can see my guitar in the background there. It's a nice Mark 12 string. And I was going to try to play a song that I used to play a lot, but I was trying to do that before we got on, and I'm just still all thumbs. I'm just still starting to get it back because I just started practicing again. So instead of playing it myself, I'm going to share a video of the original artist who recorded this. Well, this is a live version of the original artist playing this song. It's called The Wind of Change, and it's one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. So here, let's see. How can I do screen share? Where's the share? Where's the share button? Share screen. Okay, so I got to find the screen I'm going to share.
We'll close with this. When you say goodbye, we'll close with this song then. Unless you have something further to say.
Well, I think I want to say goodbye when it's done. Now,
okay.
Is it up? How do we?
I don't.
Let me see.
Perhaps to your right, you'll see two little squares that are inside each other that say share screen.
Okay, wait a minute. Stop sharing. Let me find a share screen. Share application. Okay, so there's the screen. Okay, so start sharing. Okay. What am I, for crying out?
That looks good. Then maximize it. Okay,
hold on.
Is Phil in there somewhere?
No. This is a live performance by the original organization. Here you go. It's called Wind of Change, and it's by Acoustic Alchemy.
Sound up.
Can you hear it?
Yes. Perhaps it's not sharing because it's copyrighted, James.
Not sharing?
No, we can't hear it actually. I wonder if your volume's down on it.
No, it's all the way up. All right.
We heard the first few bars and then it went dark. But acoustic alchemy,
Is it on now?
the wind of change. Yes, it's on now. Try again. There's no volume here.
Still no volume?
No volume at this end.
All right.
I can share a link to that below.
Yeah, do that. It's a beautiful song. So
And
am I back on here now?
you're not full screen. We still see your screen. And you reminded me by seeing that screen, I was reminded that you're running for Congress.
Oh, now you see this. Now you see the
There,
car
now we
screen.
see you. Yeah, now we see you again.
Oh,
So,
you do see me.
yeah.
Okay.
So it
Uh,
was acoustic alchemy that you wanted to share.
it was.
That suggestion turned up on my YouTube page not too long ago, just within the last week.
Huh.
Some synchronicity there.
Oh yeah. Well, that particular song there comes from they have the whole concert. It was done at one of the Caribbean islands, I forget. But you should watch the whole thing. It's worth it. It's a great band, one of my favorites. But anyway, so yeah, I thought that would be a good send off for Phil, but obviously it's not working. So I will just end by, well, I'm going to say a little prayer, if that's okay. Say a little prayer for Phil and for all of us. Dear Lord, thank you for joining us here today. Thank you for Phil's time with us here. We are so grateful and so fortunate to have known him, to know his spirit and your spirit reflected through him. We wish him Godspeed. We know he's in a better place and he's looking down and he's smiling. And why don't we leave by all doing the same thing, smiling in remembrance of Phil. Play it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for putting this on, Wes. And thanks everybody for watching. And good to be with you. Take care, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Mr. Simpson. And this is, of course, the first day of the quarantine in Minnesota. And this is a tremendous chance to visit with you, and everyone who's got free time to watch this is going to take heart and take courage from the message that you've given, particularly to us in Minnesota, to be not afraid. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Wes. See you later.
See you later.
Yeah.